The Indianapolis Colts pulled off the upset over the Pittsburgh Steelers as Joe Flacco came in for the injured Anthony Richardson to lead the Colts to victory. So, what are the main takeaways from the Colts win? And should we be concerned about Richardson's injury? Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast presented by Indianapolis Colts on SI.com, part of the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Andrew Moore, and as always, I'm joined here by my co-host of the Horseshoe Huddle Podcast, Drake Wally. Drake, what a roller coaster yesterday was. I mean, Anthony Richardson gets off to a very hot start. The offense is rolling. The defense is coming through. The energy in Lucas Oil Stadium was fantastic. And then the place fell silent as Anthony Richardson was on the ground in pain. Joe Flacco comes in, rescues it, keeps the offense afloat. Defense does just enough to hold off the Steelers' comeback. And we're looking at a 2-2 football team.
Yeah, and look, Joe Flacco really already showed why. You pay a backup, okay? And Anthony Richardson, up until he got hurt, was playing fantastic football against a great defense. And then the Colts, they figured it out regardless of a whole slew of injuries. They even had, which we'll get to later, but Ryan Kelly out of nowhere didn't even start the game. You know, Tanner Bortolini had to go in there, and it was a team win if there ever was one. But it also shows that Gus Bradley defense, baby, which is bend but don't break, aka stress the hell out of the fans until you win.
Yeah, and I was wrong. I said that the Colts would lose this game 20-17. It ended up being a higher scoring game than I think really anybody realized it would be, considering the over-under was at 40 and the two teams combined for over 50 points. So I mean, it was quite the showing, and this Colts team did just enough to beat the Steelers. So we're going to talk about everything, all aspects of the game, from Anthony Richardson's injury to Joe Flacco's performance, who else stepped up on offense, the defense, who is riddled. The defense is absolutely riddled with injuries, guys stepping up on both sides of the ball. I think the Colts altogether were down 7 starters or something absurd like that yesterday. But it was a resilient effort by the team to come together. Some guys really showed out for the first time this season as well, and the Colts were able to get the victory. Truitt, as always, in the chat. I love AR. Can we bubble wrap him in his uniform to keep him safe? I love the dude. Wouldn't call him a klutz, but man, so Truitt's frustrated. I know some other Colts fans are a little bit frustrated about what happened. We'll talk about that injury, because I think there's some differing viewpoints out there on Anthony Richardson. Obviously, Average Day Skyler says, "Go Colts. Good to see you." Patrick, the CFO, "Hey Drake, time to get that Bortolini jersey for the wall." Yeah, we're going to talk about Tanner Bortolini. A pretty good performance coming in, first NFL game, and he sure held his own for Ryan Kelly. Good dub from deep. We've got Yim, not a pretty win, but it's Victory Monday nonetheless. I'll take it. Exactly. My father is in the chat. Darwin Moore, I thought Matt Gay was supposed to be good. He's been kind of disappointing all year. Yeah, not a good day for Matt Gay again, and we'll talk about Matt Gay as well tonight. But as you guys are all coming in, of course, we've got to get Stats Matt in here. What's up? Did Najee's double birds break the terrible towel curse? Everyone panicked after Zaire's comments due to the terrible towel curse, but I lean that Najee's actions reversed it. So yeah, the Colts always show the opposing team coming out of the tunnel, and as we were doing that, good old Najee Harris put up the double birds right on the jumbotron there at Lucas Oil Stadium. I mean, hey, Najee Harris, maybe think about doing that before you go out there and rush for a measly 19 yards against this Colts defense. But we'll just leave it at that. So as you guys all come in, make sure you're following us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts_SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel. Hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, or like later this week. Guys, the wife has plans. I'm on dad duty on Thursday night, so we're doing our show on Wednesday night to preview Colts Jags. So be sure to be here on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Shout out to Drake for always being so flexible, but I'll be on dad duty, so we're doing the show a day early. So exactly the reason why you want to turn on those notifications, just in case you don't hear of us changing our schedule. And then if you can't catch us live, wherever you listen to podcasts, please subscribe, give us a 5-star review so we can reach other Colts fans just like you. Drake, let's dive right on into it, buddy. The Colts handed the Steelers their first loss, 27-24. And again, a lot of pundits, myself included. If you want to call myself a pundit, I'm pretty much just a guy with a microphone in my face. But I didn't think that the Colts were going to be able to withstand the defense for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yes, the Steelers defense hadn't really been tested all year, but with this, how up and down this Colts offense has been, I just didn't know if they were going to be able to overcome it, and they overcame it and then some. But of course, we got to talk about Anthony Richardson, Drake. I mean, Anthony Richardson started out really, really hot. That first drive, the accuracy was there. You could see him taking his time. The footwork was exceptional. Watch the film today. His feet were pointed at his target. He wasn't rushing. He was stepping into those throws. He had that one pass on the out to Michael Pittman Jr., where he obviously rushed it and it was incomplete. The rest of them were perfect throws by Anthony Richardson. And look what happened. Got the Colts all the way down the field on that first drive, was leading him to another touchdown on the second drive before he gets hurt. And so, again, Richardson, 3 of 4, 71 yards, 24 rushing yards just in those 2 drives to start the game for the Colts. So, Drake, before we dive into really any injury talk or even Joe Flacco, what did you see out of Anthony Richardson in that first drive and a half to 2 drives that he was able to play on Sunday?
You know what? You saw a guy that obviously didn't get to play past the first quarter, but in just that limited sample size, especially that throw to Michael Pittman, where, I mean, I think it was Michael Pittman. It was right over the fingertips of a defensive back in zone coverage, and it just drops to Michael Pittman beautifully. We talk about that Richardson was probably going to be tested with those precision throws. Well, the Steelers tested him with precision throws, and they said, okay, go out here and make these throws. And he was making them. And ironically, the one he missed was about the most open one that he threw. So it's like you were seeing things connecting, plus the three carries for 24 yards. You had a long of 14, 8 yards a carry. You were probably on your way to having at least 50 yards on the ground from Richardson, maybe even a score on the ground. I mean, he was humming. And the offensive line looked good, even with some injuries that we'll get to later. What I saw was a kid that looked like he was gaining momentum and might have finished with a pretty damn good game, way better than any one of us would have thought.
Oh, I think he was well on his way to having his best game of the season. He just, from the onset, Drake, he really looked calm in the pocket. He wasn't rushing things. And that's been the huge thing all year, is when Richardson has had his issues with accuracy, it's because he's rushing things. He even said it last week. I wrote about it multiple times. He said, I just get too excited in the pocket. I get too excited. I see a guy open. I'm like, I need to get him the ball. And he's overthinking. He's not just letting it rip. And that was the theme all week in practice from Anthony Richardson, from Shane Steichen. You heard that same phrase used over and over again. Just let it rip. And that's what he was doing, because look at that first pass over the middle. From the broadcast angle, it probably looked like that thing was going to be intercepted. From my view in Lucas Oil Stadium, it looked like a perfectly layered throw. And then when you watch the coach's film, I mean, Richardson threw an absolute dot to Michael Pittman. It was right over the outstretched arms of the Pittsburgh Steelers defender, right in the breadbasket. It couldn't have been a more perfect throw to Michael Pittman Jr. He had the short throws to Michael Pittman, the one short throw to Pittman that ended up gaining 28 yards. He had another short throw to Josh Downs that went for good yardage as well. That's what you want to see out of Anthony Richardson, and he was able to sustain a long drive that ended up in a touchdown. You combine that with the running game that Jonathan Taylor was having success early, the offensive line was making stuff move, and it was a fantastic start to the game. That is what the Colts want to see consistently out of Anthony Richardson. That is the vision for Anthony Richardson in this offense. The threat of the explosive plays, but him being able to stay calm in the pocket. He's able to complete those short throws. The threat of him running, being able to use his legs. Obviously, you want him to stay out there on the field, use his legs, combine that with Jonathan Taylor in the offensive line. You saw the vision of the Colts offense, and it's exactly what that first drive looked like on Sunday.
Yeah, and again, when we saw him struggle in these last couple games, we've been harping about it this whole time, is that you have to keep the kid out there. You have to keep him out there gaining those valuable reps. And we mentioned that this was such a great test for him, right? You've got Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and a Joey Porter Jr. I mean, you have absolutely nasty customers on that Pittsburgh defense. And they're always going to contend for a top 10 spot overall and in multiple categories. But he looked good. You know, he was getting rhythm. And obviously that one missed throw that we talked about, it's just the reason going back, you got to get him on the field. He's got to stay on the field. And we'll get to some concerns, you know, but I mean, man, while he was out there, like you said, it's hard to say because it was such a small sample size, but he looked like he was on his way to potentially leading a really good victory for the Colts.
And then the injury happens. So the injury happens on a 14-yard scramble from Anthony Richardson. He picks up the first down. He has Deshaun Elliott tackling him from behind. He has Minkah Fitzpatrick tackling him from the front. And I've watched the replay probably 10 to 15 times now, trying to see exactly when and who caused that. And it looked like it was probably when Minkah Fitzpatrick hit him kind of in the hip to side area. And it has come out. Tom Pelissero has reported that, I mean, originally it was called a hip and a hip pointer. And now it's more of just general oblique abdominal soreness. You know, there doesn't look, there's no structural damage. It's not a major injury. And I'm going to put it on the record now. I'll be shocked if Anthony Richardson doesn't play this weekend against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So obviously he goes down. He's in a lot of pain, limps off the field, really doesn't even get looked at in the medical tent. He's asked the trainers, okay. He says he's okay. And Joe Flacco's in there for, I forget how many, I think it was a couple of plays exactly. But either way, Anthony Richardson does come back in. And he tells Shane Steichen and the coaching staff, I'm good. I can come back in. Comes back in for one play. It's a quarterback draw, and instantly Richardson's not right. Now, I think there's a misconception out there that Richardson went out there and re-injured himself. That's not what happened. If you watch the play over, you can tell Richardson, he tries to do that play and he realizes that he's just not right and he goes down. Yes, Minkah Fitzpatrick hits him after the play. It doesn't cause anything, you know? So I want to make sure that that's clear, that he didn't re-injure himself. It was just, he went out there, tested it, and mid-play, he realizes I can't push off and I can't accelerate like how I want to. And he goes down. And then Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of goes into him. So after that, Richardson is helped off the field. He goes back into the locker room, sprints back out of the tunnel after being looked at, tries to give it a go. But I think at that point, the Colts were up 17-0 when he comes back out there. And the Colts had enough faith in Joe Flacco that you might, if Anthony Richardson's not 100%, you don't really necessarily want him being out there and risking further injury to this. So I think the Colts and Richardson were both smart to say, hey, let's just hold off on this. Flacco's doing well. We're not getting blown out and absolutely need Richardson in the game right now. The Colts were up 17-0, and it has been reported, and I have this from people I've talked to as well, that if he absolutely had to, Richardson could have came back in the game. He just wouldn't have been 100%. So that is the entire situation. Those are all the facts out there about the situation. And Drake, I was waiting to bring this up to you for the show, because I saw what you put out there on X. I saw what you put out there on X yesterday about Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to give you the floor to kind of just explain yourself. And I'm going to ask you point blank, because I'm going to give my answer too. Do you think at this point, well, it's a two-parter. Let's do this. Do you think Anthony Richardson at this point is injury prone? And whether you do or don't, is this a concern for Anthony Richardson moving forward?
I do think that with injury prone, there has to be a little bit of context to it. So is he continuously getting hurt from the same injury? Or are there multiple like tears and pulls and, like all sorts of like really awful injuries happening? No, not necessarily. Okay. But it just seems like there's always these little nicks and dinks and dunks. And it's like a combination of probably just not being on the field enough yet, mixed with the fact that he is going to be a physical runner. You can't take that away from him. And I think that he is to a degree injury prone now. I don't think it's a concern yet. I think that if, we're talking year 3 and 4 and he's not completed an entire season or hasn't played more than 12 games in a season or something, then you're starting to kind of sound that alarm bell because he's so freaking young. The year 4 is age 25. Okay. So I think there is a degree of injury proneness. Do I think that it's like, sound the alarm, time to think long-term about something else? Absolutely not. I think that would be a gross overreaction. And there are people that are already overreacting that far.
Oh yeah, I had people in my mentions yesterday. I hadn't even finished walking to my car after the game, and I had multiple people in my mentions saying how Joe Flacco should be the starter for this team. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Paul Wilson, thank you so much for the super chat, brother. Really, really do appreciate it. Paul says, I have defended AR since day one, but he looked soft in that situation. I don't agree with that, Paul. Respectfully, I disagree. That's not being soft when you take a helmet straight to your hip. I mean, put yourself in that situation. I don't know if you'd be feeling too hot either. And it does look like he did suffer, abdominal strain, oblique strains. And the thing is too, it's not like Anthony Richardson couldn't be out there. Because like I said, he could have returned to the game, but he wasn't going to be 100%. The threat of his legs weren't going to be there. And when you're dealing with your abdominal and your oblique, unless you've like really thrown a football and gone through all the mechanics of throwing a football, you do not know how much the abdomen and your oblique, your entire core is used when throwing the football. So it very well could have affected Anthony Richardson's accuracy. Goes out there, he's trying to do too much, he risks injuring it even further, or he ends up going and throwing interceptions. I just can't see him. I just don't agree with the soft comment. Yes, it was an unfortunate injury. Could you make an argument that he should have slid on that sooner? Absolutely. I think you can make an argument for that. But at the same time, this is football. Guys are going to get injured. I'm not going to put the injury prone label on him yet. I don't think that is the case. And I think he was trying his best to get out there and come back. You saw that by how he returned to the game. If he was soft, he wouldn't have done that. So that's just my opinion on that. But hey, Paul, still appreciate all of your support. Appreciate your comments. Definitely, that's what I like. I like when people challenge us on our opinions too. So please keep that going. Paul, thank you so much for all of your support. But yeah, Drake, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to put the injury label or injury prone label on Anthony Richardson. Do I think he still needs to be smarter with his body? Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. They're trying to plow through some guys when it's still the first quarter. You had already gotten the first down. And even if you hadn't gotten the first down, you know when to pick your battles. That wasn't a had to have it play. That was a play where he could have gotten down earlier. And I think that it's kind of the same thing that we had to talk about with Andrew Luck. Will that ever be in his mind? Honestly, probably not, because he's just not wired that way. Andrew Luck wasn't wired that way either. But if not, and if he doesn't start taking better care of his body on those scrambles, this is going to continue to be a possibility every time he takes off and every time he tries to really put his body on the line in that regard.
Yeah, and I think going back to, and I'm glad you mentioned that post that I put out, because when I said that he's one of the most injury prone I've seen, it's just the collection of injuries just in such a small amount of time in the kid's career, and there is a little bit of concern because you don't want those to pile up for him. You don't want him to have to start dealing with pain and all this stuff, because he's a freak athlete. And I do believe, respectfully, Paul, that actually Anthony Richardson he's a tough bastard. That dude is a tough bastard who will just stand in that pocket. And if he needs to take a giant hit, he'll take it. I mean, and he'll take it on the run too. So we'll see what happens, but I do think that there is a little bit of concern because kind of like with what happened with Luck, it was just a compilation of injuries that eventually added up to him just saying, all right, we got to call it quits. And you just want to monitor it. And Anthony Richardson is, like you said, I like how you mentioned, you just got to try to like make him more aware of his abilities, but you can't take away that running ability because that is what makes him truly just absolutely a disgusting matchup for defenses.
If Anthony Richardson wasn't the athlete and didn't have the dual threat ability, he wouldn't be the Colts quarterback right now. Colts wouldn't have taken him at four overall. You know, that's a big chunk of the reason why the Colts selected Anthony Richardson. You don't want to take that away. And it's a new era of football where there's not guys where there isn't going to be this. Anthony Richardson is probably never going to be a guy that has 100, 200 starts in a row. There's no quarterback that does that anymore. Those days are gone. You have to live with this, and you just hope that it doesn't end up in serious injuries year after year after year. So, but for all intents and purposes, it does seem like Anthony Richardson escaped without a serious injury. And like I said, I fully expect him to play next week against Jacksonville. But we're 20 minutes in, buddy. We haven't even talked about Joe Flacco yet, really. We could talk about it. We can make this whole show.
This show isn't just about Richardson?
I guess not. But Joe Flacco, he comes in, keeps the offense alive, 16 for 26, 168 yards, 2 touchdowns. Again, some people were saying that Joe Flacco should be the starter at quarterback. I think those people respectfully are nuts. Joe Flacco should not be the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. But this is what you brought Joe Flacco in to do, Drake. In case Anthony Richardson does go down, Joe Flacco is that veteran that can step in, keep the offense afloat, and win you a football game. And that's exactly what he did yesterday. But what are your thoughts on Joe Flacco and his performance and his ability to lead the Colts to a victory?
You know, I wrote a piece on something he mentioned on Pat McAfee that McAfee himself brought up. Obviously, Pat's from Pittsburgh, but Joe played a lot of ball in Baltimore, so he's seen a lot of the terrible towel. And he said there was one point where I'm pretty sure you were looking right at like the terrible towel, and there were a lot of those. And I thought to myself, I bet Joe's out there thinking, well, this is just like home. Like, he's just played Pittsburgh so much that I think that, 17 years in the NFL showed. I think that a former Super Bowl MVP showed there. He's a guy that is going to go out there and he's going to level your offense. All right. Again, people, for a backup, Joe Flacco, top 5. Okay. Him over AR, your offense goes from like this type of potential and explosion to like really about right here. He can't move. He does throw the ball deep, but he's just going to take what the defense gives him, which means you're not going to be an explosive offense, really. All right. So I think Flacco either does that or he goes for the deep ball. So I think that he did what you paid him to do, just a little bit over 60%, and he kept the offense afloat, man.
Exactly. And then the thing is too, I mean, when you look at the drives that Joe Flacco put together, I mean, they're nothing spectacular. He only had a couple of drives that really ended in touchdowns. So it wasn't like it was Joe Flacco that blew out the Steelers. Obviously, he played for 3.5 quarters, had 168 yards. That's nothing. That's not a banner day by any means, but he did what a backup quarterback is supposed to do. He kept this offense afloat. He gave it to the weapons out there, and he was able to convert, especially on third down. The Colts were 8 of 15 on third down yesterday, and it was really stood out to me the numerous times that it was third down. Colts were facing, those terrible towels were going. As Pat likes to say, the Yinzers were excited, and Joe Flacco just he almost saw those terrible towels and he felt at home because he has played the Steelers so much in his career. Went out there, delivered a ball that was able to get the Colts a first down. So Joe Flacco did what he needed to do. Should he start moving forward? Absolutely not. Get that out of your minds. Don't even let it enter the possibility in your minds. That is not smart. And it won't lead to anything of good, not for just this year, but for years to come. Okay. Joe Flacco is here to be the backup, point blank, end of story. And he did his job yesterday. A couple other guys that did their jobs, Drake, Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs. Welcome to the 2024 season, my guys.
There you go.
Michael Pittman Jr. From the very start, from that first play, I mean, he looked like the Michael Pittman Jr. of old. He didn't look like he was nursing back or calf injuries. And what did I say on Thursday's episode? Get Michael Pittman Jr. involved early and often, because good things happen when number 11 has the ball. 6 catches for 113 yards, and was probably in store for more, because with him and Anthony Richardson really had a connection going, and he was probably going to get, that could have easily been a 150-yard day for Michael Pittman Jr. But Josh Downs coming up clutch in major situations, numerous third down catches. That one over on the sideline, Drake, absolutely blew me away, where he stepped on a dime, just kind of twirled around the guy, picked up the first down, 8 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. This is what you want to see out of your top 2 guys. You get those guys involved, you get the ball in their hands, and you let them go to work. And because of that, in my opinion, the Colts offense, even with Anthony Richardson in there, it was the most efficient the offense has looked all season long. And I think that there is a correlation between getting those 2 guys involved and being able to sustain those drives and moving the football down the field.
Yeah, and obviously you broke down the numbers there, but each of those guys did something you're not usually correlating them with. Michael Pittman was explosive multiple times in that game. Look at his numbers: 113 receiving yards on 6 catches. That's almost 29 yards per reception. And then you're talking about Josh Downs. Not only did he do the volume catching, which, by the way, that play you mentioned, he just almost like a ballerina, just twirled just right upfield and just kept on running. It was beautiful. But it was the touchdown. He scored a touchdown. We don't associate Josh Downs with touchdowns. We associate him with first downs. And so we also, Andrew, I think we had these guys as our X factors. I think that I had Josh Downs, and you had Michael Pittman, and they went out there and not one of them showed up, but both of them showed up for both quarterbacks and just showed if they can keep doing that, my goodness, that's going to open up stuff for Pierce and Mitchell.
I mean, I'm going to tip my imaginary cap to both of us for predicting those X factors, and we nailed it right there on the head. Let's pat ourselves on the back there, Drake. But that's right. When Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs are involved like this, good things happen. It's just plain and simple. And we saw over and over again how they were able to convert on the big downs. They were the security blanket for Anthony Richardson, for Josh Downs, and Alec Pierce, who is gotten off to a fantastic start. Only 2 targets yesterday, 1 catch for 9 yards. And for being the Colts leading receiver so far this season, if you're looking at that stat line and you see only 1 catch for Alec Pierce, you're thinking, man, the passing game must have really, really struggled. But it didn't. So that's a good thing. That's not a slight to Alec Pierce. That's a good thing, because that means this Colts team has multiple options. You want that to be a thing. You want it to be where if Pierce doesn't have a good game, Pittman and Downs can step up, or if Pittman doesn't have a good game, Pierce and Downs could step up, or if Downs doesn't have a good game, you get the point. And A.D. Mitchell is getting open. Here's the frustrating part about A.D. Mitchell: is he's getting open, and eventually these catches are going to hit. Eventually these big plays are going to hit because he's getting open. The play just doesn't get finished, whether it's a bad throw, miscommunication, whether Mitchell is kind of shying away from an incoming hit, or it's just eventually it is going to work out. And I'd be more worried, I guess, if Mitchell wasn't at least getting open, but he's getting open. And eventually the more times you get open, those are going to hit. They just have to. So I'm not worried about A.D. Mitchell, but I thought it was a really good day from the top 2 wide receivers for the Colts.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, like you mentioned, with A.D. Mitchell, the catches will come. I think he's been targeted 13 times, only has 2 catches. So it is a combination of everything Andrew said. Basically, it's not going for the ball when there's a hit coming, miscommunications, and just getting adjusted to now 2 different quarterbacks, but you're getting adjusted to your 22-year-old and Richardson. And then I do think that Pierce's time will come for another big play, because like Andrew also said, you don't just want to see nothing but Alec freaking Pierce in these low games from MPJ and Josh Downs. You want to see those 2 guys, number 1 and 11, leading the charge, and then you'll get those big plays from Alec Pierce, which is bread and butter. So you got to love what you saw. And even though Alec Pierce didn't have a big game, Andrew, like you said, it was a good game passing the football for the Colts.
Exactly. And we're not going to finish our offensive talk without talking about this offensive line. Got a couple of chats I want to highlight here, Drake. Of course,
Sure.
Paul Wilson, another super chat. We didn't scare him away by disagreeing with him earlier. Paul, thank you so much for all of your support, brother. This one we can agree on. A lot of us in the chat predicted this win and why. We have the best offensive line in the NFL. Good job, O-line. TJ Watt, the offensive line, very, very impressive against the Pittsburgh Steelers, against TJ Watt, Cam Hayward. They didn't have Alex Highsmith, but if you guys go back to our preview episode and you go look at the comments, because the comments went nuts on our last episode. Number one, thank you all so much for that. Number two, there were a lot of Yinzers, a lot of Steelers fans in that chat saying that we weren't giving the respect needed to Nick Herbig, saying that he was going to dominate the Colts offensive line, and that we had another thing coming. You didn't hear Nick Herbig all day long. And I want to look at let's look at the stats here. TJ Watt, 2 tackles. That's it. Nick Herbig, 2 tackles. That's it. Well, shout out Cameron Hayward. He did get a sack and he was the most productive. He had 6 tackles on the day, but Drake, you didn't hear much out of this Steelers defensive line. And it's because of this offensive line. So, Drake, give me your thoughts on the offensive line. Paul, thank you so much again for all of your support.
Brief thought. Tony Sperano Jr. Tony Sperano Jr. deserves so much credit. Tanner Bortolini steps in his first career start. And I was thinking to myself, mother of God, they're going to put 97 on him all game long. Cam Hayward. I saw number 60, Tanner Bortolini, often in the second level hitting linebackers in the run game. All right. He looked like Ryan Kelly. All right. I'm not saying as good as Ryan Kelly, but he looks like a solution you can believe in. And then Braden Smith. Okay. Braden Smith handled TJ Watt very admirably on a very good level. And it just seems like time after time, Braden Smith shows that he is one of the most overlooked tackles in the NFL. But yeah, Tony Sperano Jr., props for having this offensive line without their captain, Ryan Kelly, absolutely ready for a very scary Pittsburgh defensive front.
And that brings us to our first Stats Matt stat of the day, presented by Busch Light, Stats Matt's favorite beer. Stat 1 and my least favorite stat due to the theme. Watt only had 1 pressure on 21 pass rushes against Braden Smith. 1 pressure from the defensive player of the year on 21 pass rushes against Braden Smith. And then against 8 other attempts where Watt aligned elsewhere, he had 1 pressure. So first game was 0 sacks and the worst pressure percentage in 2024 by TJ Watt. This is why it was so crucial that Braden Smith played on Sunday, Drake, because if you look at the history, whenever the Colts have Braden Smith out there, TJ Watt doesn't do anything. TJ Watt is basically a non-factor. But when Braden Smith isn't out there, I think at least in the past 4 games that the Colts and Steelers have played, 2 of them Braden Smith hasn't been out there. In those 2 games, TJ Watt has 2 sacks apiece. In the other 2 games, he has 0 combined. So that's how big of an impact Braden Smith is for this team. Is criminally underrated at the right tackle position. Outside of Indianapolis, not very many people know of Braden Smith. But if you know football, you know Braden Smith is one of the best right tackles in the NFL. Fantastic stats, Matt. Thank you so much, buddy. And yeah, Tanner Bortolini as well. Tanner Bortolini didn't have an excellent game. Wouldn't say that. When you watch the film, he does get beat a couple of times, but for his first start after being a healthy scratch, the first 3 games to just get thrown into the fire like that, Bortolini held up and he made some plays out there in both the run game and the pass game, Drake. So yeah, Tanner Bortolini. And then after that first touchdown by Jonathan Taylor, Bortolini goes running down the sidelines. You love to see it. You love to see the joy there. I mean, a hell of a performance by Tanner Bortolini, stepping in for a Pro Bowler and Ryan Kelly, and this Colts offense not missing a beat.
Yeah, and you're talking about the captain of the offensive line, Ryan Kelly, who has to make so many reads, so many adjustments. A lot of that probably fell on guys like Nelson, probably fell on guys like Smith. But hey, you got the win, and he wasn't a liability, which is all you can ask. And instead, he excelled.
Exactly. And I want to give a couple more stats here. 4.2 yards per carry is what the offensive line uh, helped produce on the ground. Jonathan Taylor with 88 yards, Anthony Richardson, obviously. So 4.2 yards per carry. The offensive line helped to produce. Only 2 sacks allowed for this Pittsburgh Steelers defense, for this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. One was by Cam Hayward. The other was a half sack each by Larry Ogunjobi and Beanie Bishop Jr. But I'm going to echo what you said earlier, Drake. Tony Sperano Jr. doing a hell of a job with this group. All right, Drake, let's move it on to the defensive side of the football. And let's be honest, Justin Fields, while it didn't necessarily, I think, add up in the scoring column. I mean, yes, he did have 3 total touchdowns, but he had some big mistakes as well. But Justin Fields certainly moved the football up and down the field. I don't think that's in dispute from yesterday. Big numbers, but also big mistakes. 312 passing yards and a touchdown. Also had 55 yards rushing with 2 rushing touchdowns for Justin Fields, accounting for all of their touchdowns yesterday. But then you had the bad 4 sacks. The pressure really got to Justin Fields yesterday, and the Colts did a really good job of keeping him in the pocket. And when he did get outside the pocket, he didn't really make too much work that way, where it ended up blowing up the game for the Colts defense. 4 sacks, 2 fumbles forced. So, Drake, what do you think about the Colts game plan for Justin Fields, and then how they executed? Because again, a lot of yards, and he really did have a decent game, but those mistakes by Justin Fields really killed the Steelers' opportunity to make a full comeback.
Yeah, the sacks, they were crucial when they happened. All right, you obviously had turnovers that were crucial when they happened, and I think Nick Cross knocked it away or forced a fumble on George Pickens in the red zone, and then Julian Blackman fell on it. But the pressure rate, yeah, and you're talking about Dio Dengbo on his own had a sack and a half. So, I mean, minus DeForest Buckner, I mean, they really they made Justin Fields' life kind of a living hell, because they did a combination of things. I mean, while he did have 10 carries for, I think, like 55 rushing yards, they kept him as much as possible in that pocket while also applying the pressure up front, like right in front of him. So they contained him on the outside and got the defensive tackles to put pressure on him up front. And it's just like, you keep a running quarterback who, let's be honest, Fields is playing great football under Tomlin, but I mean, he's a running quarterback, and you want the offense to be able to run the football around him. So when you force him to do those kind of things, he's probably going to make a mistake here or there. But hey, give him credit, man. That was a banged up team that just kept getting hurt throughout the game. Still puts 3 touchdowns on the Colts.
Yeah, the Colts definitely. I mean, they did without the turnovers forced by this defense.
Yeah,
I mean, we're talking probably about a loss. Because those defense really helped in the bad snap, helped because the Steelers in the second half, I don't know if it's because the defense was gassed or if the Steelers really found something, but in the second half, the Steelers were rattling off touchdowns, just going up and down the field. And when they had that final drive where the defense had to end it, I mean, really what set the Steelers was behind was that bad snap. And it ended up being a, 2nd and 22, 3rd and 22, something egregious like that. That was really hard to come back from. So, I mean, you got to credit the Colts defense for forcing those turnovers. Chris Lamons for forcing the fumble there.
Sure.
You had another fumble by Justin Fields. So, again, there was plenty of good with this Colts defense as far as forcing the turnovers. Still a lot of work to do if you're going to allow Justin Fields to almost put up 400 total yards of offense. So, but hey, guys stepped up, Drake. We talked about it. No Samson Ebukam, obviously. No DeForest Buckner, obviously. Kenny Moore, out. Kwity Paye, out. 4 defensive starters alone. Or Juju Brents out. 5 defensive starters out for this Indianapolis Colts team. Dio Odangbo steps up with a huge game. A sack and a half for Dio Odangbo. I think that gives him 2 on the year. Already leading the Colts in sacks is Dio Odangbo. EJ Speed, 13 tackles. EJ Speed now leads the league in tackles. Him and Nick Cross are tied for the league in tackles, which I guess is a good and a bad thing, for being honest. But both those guys really stepped up in the front seven. And then I did see a comment earlier from, I'll try to find it here, but Latu as well, Drake. Latu didn't have it was from deep. Let me find that here. Latu, yeah, shout out to Latu. He had a great game that won't show on the box score. Yeah, Latu was in the backfield with consistent pressure. It's not going to show in the box score, but when you look at the advanced stats, that's what you need is the constant pressure from Latu. Grover Stewart had a really good game in there as well. So when you just look at this front seven, Drake, really solid game. And outside of Justin Fields, the Colts defense did a really good job, held Cordell Patterson to 43 yards, Najee Harris to 19. They were able to do a really good job up front, but especially Dio Dangbo and EJ Speed.
Yeah, and look, it was a team effort defensively, and I also like the fact that you highlighted Deep's comment, because Latu was he was all over the place, and he was constantly in Justin Fields' grill, man. I mean, he was providing pressure, and that is exactly what this dude is going to be. He's going to be a pressure machine. He had 5 pressures against the Bears alone. So I mean, you give him an opportunity out there, and he's going to definitely continuously do that. The only thing that's missing, I think, are the sacks and potentially the box score numbers, but that stuff that's not going to show up in the box score is really, I think, where Latu is going to excel the most.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only a matter of time before you start to see those sacks, those tackles for loss really start to pile up for Latu. He's close, Drake. He's close. And he had a lot of snaps on Sunday as well because of the injury to Kwity Paye. Tyquan Lewis hurt his elbow, which required Latu to step up, and he showed that he can handle a lot of snaps as well. I think that's just going to continue to help his development. And every time I see Latu out there and watch the film, I become more impressed because, again, might not show up in the box score, but a lot of the reason that some of these other guys are getting to the quarterback is because Latu is taking so much attention away from them. It's opening other guys up, and the Colts haven't had that, besides DeForest Buckner, in a really, really long time. Live update for the Titans game against the Miami Dolphins. First drive, as StatsMat says, Levis interception. And other news, water is wet, so we can move on from there. But then I want to talk about the secondary, Drake, because the secondary, honestly, you're down Kenny Moore, you're down Juju Brents, so you've got Sam Womack in there, you've got Chris Lamons, Dallas Flowers, and the guy that really stood out, Sam Womack. Obviously, Jalen Jones, he had the primary assignment of George Pickens, but he came up big with a really big PBU pass breakup in that final drive. But it's Sam Womack that gets the StatsMat stat of the day, for the second StatsMat stat of the day, I should say, presented by Busch Light. 36 coverage snaps, 4 targets, 1 reception for 12 yards, and a 39.6 passer rating allowed. The same rating in 18 snaps last week. And then has a second stat from Sam Womack. Average separation allowed over the last 2 weeks is 1.45 yards. Drake, Sam Womack, is he the surprise of the year for this Colts defense? I mean, a guy that was picked off of waivers from the San Francisco 49ers. The Colts liked him a couple of years ago when he was coming out of the draft, just weren't able to grab him. But Sam Womack looks like a hit. He looks like that depth that the Colts have so desperately needed at the cornerback position. And certainly with Juju Brents going down for the year, Sam Womack is becoming a starter for the Colts this season outside cornerback.
You know, that's just absolutely crazy to hear you say that, because I can't believe that I'm about to say but he looked good. He looked good in that game against the Steelers. And like you said, he made plays when they mattered. Obviously, 36 coverage snaps, you're entrusting him, to take care of guys like George Pickens and guys like Calvin Austin, if he was playing on the outside or if he did play a little on the inside as well. But yeah, that's what you desperately need, because Juju Brents, it's assumed he's done for the entire season, more than likely done for the whole year. Jalen Jones, he needs support, and he got it in this game because you were also missing Kenny Moore. I mean, just fantastic job from Sam Womack. And even when Kenny Moore returns, I would fully expect him and Chris Lamont to at least be factored in to maybe some sub coverages at some point, because they both showed out in that game, man.
Oh yeah, I think that Sam Womack is earning that starting spot over Dallas Flowers right now. He really is.
Oh, definitely.
When Kenny Moore's back, your starting trio is Kenny Moore and Jalen Jones are out there in the base defense, and then when they go to nickel, Sam Womack comes in and Kenny Moore slides into the slot. And honestly, Drake, they're playing pretty well. The secondary hasn't been the problem this year for the Indianapolis Colts. So as long as this keeps up, Chris Ballard is gonna have some bragging to do, especially if Jalen Jones and Sam Womack continue to progress as the season goes along, which both those guys are still very, very young. Wouldn't surprise me if they do. And it's not just the cornerbacks either. You got to shout out to Nick Cross making plays out there, as a forced fumble on George Pickens after the missed tackle by Jalen Jones that really halted any momentum that the Steelers had. George Pickens runs that in for a touchdown, that the Steelers win. And what a hell of a play by Nick Cross. Julian Blackman, a hell of a play to scoop it up. Blackman was all over the place yesterday. This secondary is really coming together. Now, granted, they haven't faced a top quarterback yet. Josh Allen is still on the schedule. Trevor Lawrence next week. While Trevor Lawrence has been struggling, Trevor Lawrence has the ability to go off at any time. CJ Stroud, you still have again on the schedule. Jared Goff and the Lions are still on the schedule. So there's still some really good quarterbacks and really good offenses that this secondary for the Colts is going to have to stand up against. And they do need to limit more yardage, because the Steelers and Justin Fields, they had 312 yards after the 4 sacks. It was 280 yards. So there are still areas in the secondary that need to improve as the season goes along, but it hasn't been the major hole that I think a lot of Colts fans thought it was going to be heading into the season.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a black hole. I really did. I'll be honest with you. When Juju Brents went down, man, I was like, Jalen Jones and Kenny Moore, okay. But Dallas Flowers, so many question marks, plus the injury. And I mean question marks as a corner, not as a returner. But then the depth was just really, really murky. And here you are, you're looking at the cornerback stepping up. But like you mentioned, Nick Cross, that forced fumble, he basically rang right around George Pickens' neck and just popped that thing out. George Pickens probably had this much space between his foot and the sideline. Mm-hmm. All right. And Nick Cross kept him in bounds and knocked the football away. I gotta be honest, man. The biggest surprise, Will Fries is pretty damn close for me because he is dominating to the point where he might need a contract. But Nick Cross, good God, Sam Womack's a surprise, but Nick Cross was scrutinized. We were all at some point saying probably, well, this guy isn't ready yet. You got to get Justin Simmons. So far, Ballard looks very intelligent for not signing Justin Simmons and just letting Cross play because he's playing out of his freaking mind right now.
I'm going to put you on the spot right here. Say the Colts can only sign one of these guys in free agency. Who are you signing right now? Will Fries or Ryan Kelly? That's a tough question, I know, because I don't even know the answer.
I would probably go with Ryan Kelly because I feel like you can replace a guard. I think you can replace a guard more than you can a center. And I think Ryan Kelly might have 3 more good years.
Yeah. I think that
Jason Kelsey, he played till he was like 36.
Potentially Ryan Kelly, which is crazy to see, to even think about. But if Will Fries continues to play at this level, Ryan Kelly might be cheaper than Will Fries because of his age and everything. And I mean, you do have the option. I think Matt Gonzalez can play guard. Tanner Bortolini can play guard. So it's an interesting conundrum. I mean, who knows? Maybe the Colts will probably end up signing both of those guys, having 50% of their cap space dedicated to the offensive line, and we're just gonna have to roll with it. But we'll see what happens. But all right, Drake. I mean, 27-24. Colts are now 2-2 heading into a Week 5 matchup in Jacksonville, and we all know the history there. We won't really dive into that. We'll dive in tonight. We'll dive into it on Thursday. But what are your we're a month into the season now. What are your overall thoughts on this 2-2 Colts team?
I think I'm comfortable because, you're looking at adjustments that have been made in the run game. All right. And those adjustments have been made obviously against maybe some offenses that aren't exactly superhuman. But they've been made without DeForest Buckner. They were made without Kwity Paye. They were made without Kenny Moore and just Juju Brents, just all these starters. Richardson goes down. You get a replacement in a 39-year-old statue that comes in there with a rocket arm, and he just goes out there and gets you a win. I'm honestly okay. And I know Jacksonville has the history, but holy cow, man, they look as bad as they have in the Trevor Lawrence, Doug Peterson era. So I think that we'll see, but I'm comfortable with the Colts right now. Barring any setbacks, like you said, I expect Richardson to play on Sunday. So
I like that word, comfortable. I think the
yeah,
Colts are in a they're not in I wouldn't say great spot, but I think they're in
no,
a good spot. They're definitely dealing with a lot of injuries. They need to get guys healthy, and we're going to look at the injury list just from yesterday. The guys need to come back. DeForest Buckner. It's going to be great to have DeForest Buckner back. He's been out 2 weeks. At least 2 more weeks to go. Will he be back week 7 against the Miami Dolphins? Probably too early to tell at this point. We'll have to see. Or will it be week 8 in Houston? I think the Colts desperately need him to win in Houston, but they need to get healthy. But I think we've already seen some of the major problems that the Colts have had early in the season get resolved. The run defense that allowed back-to-back games of over 250 yards. I mean, they stood up against the Chicago Bears, and they only allowed 122, which is about league average against the Steelers. 55 of those came from Justin Fields. The running backs themselves, Cordell Patterson 43 yards, Najee Harris 19. So it seems like they have fixed that. The secondary is starting to slowly come along. The pass rush is getting plenty of pressure. On the offensive side of the ball, Jonathan Taylor looks good. We'll talk about his injury here in a second, but he looks good. He looks fast. The offensive line, you have no complaints. What have I been saying? What have we been saying for the past 2 years? It's all about Anthony Richardson. And
right.
you've seen the highest of highs with this kid already this season, and you've seen the lowest of lows. But what I saw yesterday and those first 2 drives was very, very promising. You can see what is in there with Anthony Richardson. It's not like this is what kind of frustrates me about some of the people online that talking about he will never be accurate. He can be accurate. He literally showed you yesterday that he can be accurate. He showed you on the film when he takes his time, when he lines his feet up, when he cleans up his footwork, he can be as accurate as anybody in the NFL. He can deliver the football on time. He can lead receivers, put it where they can go upfield. He can dot it around the entire field. It's in there. It's just about doing it consistently. In order to do that, he needs live reps. He needs to stay on the football field, and he needs to be continually hammering that home to just let it rip. Just let it rip. Don't overthink it. Don't rush yourself. Just go out there and play football like you know how to play it. So as long as that continues, I think that this Colts season the rest of the way could be a lot of fun. I'm not going to say that they're going to win the division or be one of the best teams in the AFC. I think by saying that, it's unrealistic, and you don't want to put too many high expectations on this team. But you want to see this continued growth out of Anthony Richardson and the rest of the team. And then when you get to January, who knows what can happen. But I'm excited to see what transpires the rest of the way. Drake, let's talk about the injuries from yesterday, guys that missed the game and guys that had to leave the game. Anthony Richardson, obviously, with that oblique abdominal strain, he said he's feeling good, and all reports are indicating that he should be good to go against Jacksonville. Obviously, we'll see on Wednesday when the first injury report comes out how things are looking, but it seems like the Colts that he dodged a major injury there. Jonathan Taylor, this one is a little bit more up in the air. So it was reported late last night by Ian Rappaport that it was a high ankle sprain for Jonathan Taylor. Yikes. As we've seen with Josh Downs, DeForest Buckner, it's month injury. But it seems like from not just Rappaport, but from other Colts sources, Tom Pelissero has said this as well, that it seems very mild and that he's going to be okay. Does he play against Jacksonville? I don't know about that. I don't know if Jonathan Taylor's out there for Jacksonville. But Shane Steichen even said today that short-term IR is not being considered for Jonathan Taylor. So it doesn't seem like this is a big a major injury that's going to cause him to miss much time. Maybe he misses this week, but I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, the Colts dodged a couple of major bullets with the injuries to Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah, I mean those are your top two playmakers, and I mean they generally, when they're on the field together, are going to be the first and second guys to touch the football. So I mean you want them both as healthy as possible. And yeah, when you're talking about a hip / oblique / abdomen for Richardson, which abdomen, my God, you can have a strained abdomen, some kind of tear, torn abdominal. It is an awful injury. So you dodged a bullet there, and like you said, with the high ankle sprain, which it's the same injury Taylor had, which is a little bit more, you dodged maybe a couple additional bullets there. So.
Exactly. Tyquan Lewis also left the game yesterday with an elbow injury. That not good. Again, obviously Tyquan Lewis has had a really good season, and if Kwity Paye has to miss another week and Tyquan Lewis, there's your three of your top defensive ends are now out again, if you include Samson Ebukam, and that puts Leatu Latu and Dayo Odangbo in those spots that they will have to take over and play a lot of snaps against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then the guys that missed the game yesterday, Ryan Kelly with the neck, Kwity Paye with the quad, Kenny Moore the second with the hip. You're hoping those guys can return this week. Ryan Kelly was a game time decision, so I think he would be the closest one to return. But Kwity Paye and Kenny Moore didn't practice at all last week, so obviously they'll need to return to the practice field. But Drake, the overall theme is a lot of big names are getting banged up for the Colts right now. Some guys are already out. These guys are more and more piling up, because right there, what I just named off, 6 starters injured currently for the Colts, and so really Indianapolis needs to get healthy, especially when they're looking at a upcoming stretch the next month. 3 out of their next 4 games are against AFC South opponents.
Yeah, they're going to come fast, so you cannot lose. You can't go lose all 3 of those divisional games in a row. So even if they're banged up, hopefully the depth can make it good enough so they can get a win.
Exactly. All right. Let's finish off this Victory Monday with our Colts Player of the Game. Drake, I think this has been the hardest Colts Player of the Game award to give out so far this year, because you can go a ton of different angles. So whether it's the backup quarterback, whether it's somebody on the defensive side of the football, a guy that has reemerged this season. So I'm interested to see, who is your Colts Player of the Game for the win over the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Yeah, this one was really difficult, but I'm going to go with Nick Cross, because he continuously plays fantastic football. He forced a crucial turnover right on the sideline where, I mean, it just could have been one more inch and it's out of bounds, and that changed the entire complexion of the football game. Close runner-up, though, Dayo Odangbo, man. There's been a few times over the past couple of years, he just shows absolute dominance at times.
Yeah, I this one was so tough for me, because I wanted to honestly go with Pittman, because I mean, Pittman coming out leading this offensive charge. Tanner Bortolini you could pick, obviously Joe Flacco, but I am going to go with Dayo Odangbo, because Kwity Paye is out. They need a guy that steps up, and it's Dayo Odangbo. Getting 1.5 sacks consistently in the backfield. I think he had like a third of his pass rushing snaps where he generated pressure on, which is just absurd. So Dayo Odangbo, my Colts Player of the Game. Stats Matt is going to go with EJ Speed for breaking records and being everywhere. I think EJ Speed ended up his 8th consecutive game with double-digit tackles. EJ Speed has been everywhere. So that's a great pick. Patrick is going with Tanner Bortolini as his honorary pick, but we all know it's actually Grant Stewart who is going to be picked by the CFO here. Paul Wilson is saying Bortolini or Joe Flacco. John Hendricks on Bortolini, and so hey, the people are liking Bortolini. Don't hate that at all. But Drake, 2-2 for the Indianapolis Colts, and after starting 0-2, they're back to 500. I think they're in a really good spot, and obviously a huge game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are really hungry for a win. Almost beat the Houston Texans on Sunday. So just because the Jacksonville Jaguars are 0-4, this is not going to be an easy game by any means for the Indianapolis Colts. Haven't won there in 9 years. We'll see if they're going to be able to do it in year number 10.
Yeah, and Trevor Lawrence has had great luck against the Colts, so do not discount Trevor Lawrence. He's at any given moment he's going to have an absolutely gaudy performance. You're just hoping it's not in week 5.
Exactly. But hey, for now, the Steelers, again, falling to the Colts in back-to-back seasons. Shane Steichen now 2-0 against the Pittsburgh Steelers as the Colts head coach. So that's our show for this evening, guys. Really appreciate everybody tuning in to talk Colts football on Victory Monday with us. Shout out to Paul Wilson, our lone super chatter of the night. But Paul, thank you so much for all of your support, brother. We really, really do appreciate it. And everyone else that joined us this evening, make sure you go follow us on all of our socials, like Horseshoe Huddle on Facebook, follow at Colts _SI on X, and subscribe to the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel and hit that bell so you know when Drake and I go live every Monday and Thursday night, or like on this week when we go live Wednesday night at 7 p.m. We'll be back to preview the Colts Jags game. Don't miss it. And then if you can't catch us live, be sure to give us a follow, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and hit and make sure you leave a review as well. So Drake, tell the people what you've got out there on horseshoehuddle.com. After this game, you've got a lot of good analysis.
Yeah. So I did the risers and fallers from the game, the good and bad. So go check that out. And then I'm also going to be releasing the 3 biggest surprises so far for the Colts in the 2024 season.
Love it. Myself had to write about Joe Flacco and his performance yesterday, what he had to say after the game, coming in for Anthony Richardson. Not a situation Joe Flacco is really used to, but he was able to go out there and handle it very well. Also heard from Anthony Richardson talking about his injury. Those comments are in there. And I usually do some PFF grades on Tuesday, but guys, Matt Gay hasn't been great for Matt Gay. He's 3 for 5 on the year, more misses. He spoke to the media today and gave us some very interesting comments. So I'm going to give some analysis on Matt Gay and what he said. That'll be out tomorrow on horseshoehuddle.com. Go follow Drake at DWalsterDrake. You can follow me at Andrew Moore NFL, and we'll be back Wednesday night, guys, to preview Colts Jags in Jacksonville. Should be a hell of a game. So until then, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the rest of Victory Monday, and we'll be seeing you soon, Colts fans.